is important there. So I mean, I think it's sort of all of the above with kind of varying levels of emphasis, I guess. The other thing I would point out is that we, I mean, again, especially people like myself who work at RAND and other think tanks where we focus on a lot of conflict scenarios, forget that just on a day-to-day basis, Taiwan faces a lot of pressure of different types from China, not just military operations around Taiwan or something like that, but also sort of economic pressure or kind of low-level economic coercion. Kind of constraints on Taiwan's international activities and all of that. And I have also certainly heard the argument that when the U.S. commits to arms sales to Taiwan, knowing that it will anger China and that China will, it may or may not really retaliate meaningfully, but will at least be very irritated with the United States, and that it might have costs in terms of cooperation in other areas maybe. We're also kind of sending a signal, not just that we're prepared to defend Taiwan in a crisis or a conflict, but that we're prepared to help Taiwan resist Chinese coercion on a day-to-day basis, even if there's a cost to the U.S.-China relationship. And I'm not really, I think that's an interesting argument, and it seems to me to have some merit that we're also kind of showing our willingness to to incur some costs in terms of U.S.-China relations, and there may be some value in that. On the second question, I think like in any other defense establishment, any other military, I mean, there are people who want to be promoted for a whole variety. I mean, because they think they're the right person for the job, or because they really want to get that whichever star is one more than how many they have now, or what have you. So I'm not sure. I don't know whether that's really. I mean, I guess it's often portrayed as sort of a bad thing. On the other hand, if you have people who are kind of more savvy about how you actually get the LY to fund things, or fail to, or how you get politicians to commit to harder decisions about defense policy issues that they might not really want to, but might be in Taiwan's best interest. I mean, I guess there could be sort of an upside to people being more focused on the politics of defense policy also. I mean, I suppose that would at least be a maybe a silver lining or something like that.
American making noises on South Sea Islands. And the third thing is the software part. It's domestic. The last 3 or 4 years, whenever I read Hong Kong newspaper, which is on the daily basis, and sometimes even Macau newspaper, there were very negative impression of Taiwan's popular societal level image of the military brass, private being mistreated, sexual humiliation, and all sorts of things. Some of the Taiwan students here asked, yes, they said, some of our parents, grandparents said, good Lord, the military is now a collection of garbage can recycles or thugs. Why support the military? Because, they may not be able to stand up with or without U.S. arms the communists from across the strait. But domestically, they are all that kind of scandal. What? An open day for relatives to visit some helicopter hardware to young recruits under training and certainly die in the dormitory or under detention. I don't know how many such headline news. And so I don't know how is the morale of the rank and file, but there were several resignations of deputy or defense minister just to take blame, not for their corruption or whatever, for rank and file morale or personal conduct problem. So if the software part is problematic, what U.S. would sell is probably you don't have the right person to operate the hardware.
So I think there are kind of 3 parts to the question. The first one was on whether arms sales are being delayed to entice China to be more cooperative on North Korea. I really don't know. I mean, there's certainly a lot of speculation and argument about that. I mean, I'll say that I think that thus far the new administration's approach to China has been potentially kind of too accommodating on certain issues. I mean, we did finally see a freedom of navigation operation near, in the South China Sea recently after a lot of speculation about why have we not seen one yet. I'm hopeful that Taiwan arms sales will kind of go ahead and that will resolve the speculation. But until that happens, I think there will be some concerns about whether there's too much linkage between different issues and whether that gives China too much leverage over U.S. policy on other areas to try to motivate them to be more cooperative on North Korea. I mean, I think the bottom line is China will be about as cooperative as China thinks it is in its own interest to be on North Korea, more or less, regardless of what we do on other issues. So I would resist linking any of them and treat the Taiwan arms sales on its own merits. I think is the right way to go. On the One Belt, One Road, I think that the aircraft carriers are partially about being a great navy, right? Just in a kind of a bureaucratic and service interest kind of sense. About having a great navy kind of commensurate with China's status as a major power in Asia and increasingly around the world. So I think there are important sort of symbolic reasons for China and for the PLA Navy to want to have the beginnings of a carrier navy. I mean, you might find things to do with it in a Taiwan scenario, but I tend to think it's more focused on kind of the vulnerability of their imports at greater distances potentially, and especially on maritime disputes. Because again, for if you're talking about the Philippines or Vietnam as an adversary, the aircraft carriers might play a different role than if you're talking about the United States or Japan. So then the third question is a really excellent question. It's kind of about the military's relationship to society in Taiwan, the level of confidence people have in the armed forces.
Or at least an image, probably.
Right, the image, and that has an effect on whether people want to join, whether people want to stay in. It has an effect on a lot of important domestic political issues. Just going back to those DPP, Defense Policy Blue Papers that I talked about, they actually highlighted that in a certain amount of detail in one of the papers. And so Taiwan's armed forces have this kind of long-standing three faiths as the slogan, and they're kind of like internally focused. But the DPP, Defense Policy Blue Paper, suggested a new three faiths that had more to do with the military's relationship with society and its image, in a sense. And so, I mean, people are certainly acutely aware of those challenges. How easy or difficult they are to resolve. I think there are, a lot of that onion has a lot of layers. I'm not sure. I don't think we can probably give it the amount of attention it deserves. But you highlight, it's a critical point that the image of the armed forces and their relationship to society has really big impact on whether they can accomplish what they're trying to accomplish.
Stu? Sir, thank you for your comments. I would be interested, kind of tying in the gentleman's remarks and Ambassador Eichenberry's comment on the third level of political deterrence, as well as our recent discussion. The Taiwan-China relationship is asymmetrical, and those asymmetries are going to be exploited. Scandals will be highlighted because of the fact that Taiwan is an open society. In my view, it would be a relatively low-cost, high-payoff cooperation for the United States to assist in building political defense resilience with Taiwan's military and society. To what extent is that being looked at, if at all, or and how do we move beyond defense as a military-to-military cooperative to liberal democracy cooperative?
That's a fantastic question. I think not even in a conflict scenario, but just on a day-to-day basis where Taiwan has to worry about sort of different kinds of Chinese pressure or subversion in a more sort of pointed kind of context.
And I'm thinking specifically of the three warfares and
all those kinds of things, right? So there's obviously a greater kind of premium on resilience, very broadly defined. So not just can my airbase operate under attack, or how quickly can I recover and conduct operations again, or can I protect my critical infrastructure from cyber attack and all those kinds of questions, but the broader questions about how to kind of resist psychological warfare and all that. I don't know. There's certainly attention to the kind of homeland security type and infrastructure types of issues. The broader challenge and what it means to be sort of a liberal democracy under some degree of pressure or assault external from external sources is a really great question. I think we should be paying a lot more attention to it. I mean, if we just look at Russian interference in the election, and I think Putin just gave an interview today in which someone asked him basically, are squabbles between the U.S. and NATO good for Russia? And well, of course they are. They're terrific for Russia, basically. So clearly he has a strategy that's aimed at promoting or intensifying any sources of discord that would be out there for him to exploit. Likewise, we know that China has three warfares and has its own approach to trying to make things more difficult for not Taiwan, the U.S., and all the other directions in which they apply those kinds of approaches. So, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it should be a subject of a lot more discussion and attention. And I think resources kind of put against figuring out how to address that.
I want to exercise Chair's prerogative and follow up on that question. One thing that didn't come up in your talk so far is relationships with other potential partners in the region. So the U.S. security alliances are all these kind of spoken hub relationships. And a natural thing to at least consider is Japan and Taiwan and South Korea at least have some similar security interests and concerns, and obviously a very sensitive political issue, but in your private conversations with people, are there discussions about trying to cooperate more closely with the Japanese or the South Koreans?
Yeah, I think Japan in particular, I mean, I would characterize as, after the United States, Japan would be the next most important partner for Taiwan. Singapore has also kind of played a role there, although Singapore China leaned on them pretty hard recently over several issues, one of which, of course, involved the temporary confiscation of their armored personnel carriers, although I've heard different versions of that story, some of which say it had less to do with the Singapore-Taiwan connection, which is, of course, long-standing and didn't just suddenly start bothering China, and maybe had more to do with China being upset about Singapore being more forward-leaning on South China Sea issues, and so chose that as a means of exercising some leverage over Singapore. So yes, I mean, definitely there are other potential partners. I think Japan really is the one that, if you're talking to people in Taiwan or in Japan, that they all clearly recognize the importance of that relationship. And like for the U.S., I mean, for Japan, it's not just about the security issues. It's it's an economic and sort of unofficial diplomatic and security partnership that's actually we talk about Taiwan defense issues all the time, but if you look at Taiwan-U.S. relations in a broader perspective, there's an enormous economic connection. There's a lot of investment from Taiwan in the U.S. that creates jobs in the U.S. Taiwan's an important trade partner for the U.S. I think if we had TPP, I could certainly envision Taiwan eventually becoming a participant in that. So there were a lot of broader sort of forms of connectivity there. I think that's also the case in terms of Japan's relationship with Taiwan.